No, I was hoping, oh, why is her name just completely got out of my head? But there was somebody who used to talk about being on the athletic teams all the time. Was it Marge? Oh, who was it? It was joining us for a while and then she kind of disappeared. I think it was Marge. And she was always talking about playing softball and not soccer, something else, lacrosse or field hockey,
Yeah.
perhaps. Yeah. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm glad to see you all full face with no masks on, as I was saying earlier. That's the nice thing about Zoom right now. And I do want to just give a shout out to National Grand Bank, who for the second year in a row has been sponsoring the Marblehead Memories Project. So allowing events like these and some upcoming events we'll have later in the year to happen. So we're very grateful for their support. So I don't know. I think you've all been on one of these before. Maybe we have a one or two newcomers. So just basically, it's especially with a small crew, it's just kind of a conversation. Once a month, we pick a topic and just have a discussion about it. Share some memories, people you remember at events that took place, anything like that that you want to share. It is recorded and it will be put online in the Marblehead Memories archive and on our website as well. So trying to preserve some of these stories for future generations of Marbleheaders. So Roger, I'm glad you could join us because I know you have
Yeah.
some amazing history in the athletics of Marblehead's past. Do you mind introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about it? Oh, you're on mute. Sorry. You're on mute still. There you go.
How's that?
Awesome.
Roger Tuvison, retired high school, middle school teacher, 37 years in Marblehead. And I coached baseball, varsity baseball for 23 or 4 years. I coached softball, which I loved doing the last 5 or 6 years of my teaching career, and basketball for over 30 years at an assistant level. And listening to what you said, Lauren, just now, I'm wondering if there would be some way, and maybe you would have to get it in written form, we could send out some information. Our athletic director, who is retired, Alex Kulovich, has got, tremendous, I think, materials to get us back to some of the athletes. And I certainly know many, many athletes that came through the school system. And the reason why I've joined today is I'd like to tell you about the very first team in Marblehead High School history that ever won a state championship. And that was in 1985. I have already given Marblehead Museum a couple of scrapbooks that I kept, and I still can't find the scorebook. I think one of my players still has it. But what I've done the last few days, and it's really been fun, is I've contacted the players on that team, and I've received emails from them with some of their memories in written form, and I've put them into a PDF. I'm not quite finished yet, but it's something I will add to those scrapbooks. But I would like to share with you at some point during this session a couple of their comments, if you'd like to hear them.
Absolutely. You
We
want
can
to
do
kick
that.
us off?
And by the way, Amy, I loved that presentation the other day when you were comparing the Lee Mansion with the place in, it was in the Carolinas?
Oh, in Virginia, Gunston
In
Hall.
Virginia. It was wonderful. I didn't get it all, and but I liked what I saw. And I too liked Judy Anderson's presentation a couple of days ago. That I wish she only gave the addresses of some of those homes, and maybe she can't. Maybe people don't want those addresses, because I thought I knew Marblehead historical homes, but I'll tell you, I didn't recognize some of those. And I thought the oldest house in Marblehead was the Ambrose Gale house on Franklin Street, but she showed, I don't know, 4 or 5 I had no clue on. And the reason why I mention that is because when in the 70s and 80s, we were able to do an architectural project in town, and we did it for several years. And what we did was we assigned 3 or 4 students a pre-1800 home in town, and we had them do photographs, interior and exterior. We had them write histories. We had a lawyer teach them how to do deed research. They went over to Salem, the Salem federal building, and looked up deeds and probates where they got into what people left when they died. I'll never forget the list that included nails and boards and things like that, tools. And we had a great time with that. They did gravestone rubbings. They invited the owners in to see a slide presentation, and we had a phenomenal time and a good run. We had some national attention to that unit, and the kids got a lot out of it. Some of them went into law and became architects, I think, because of it. And anyway, I thought I knew something about Marblehead architecture, Marblehead history, but I am dying to see the rest of Judy's presentations, because, you know, there's so much to learn.
Well, good. Well, I'm glad you
Yeah.
like it.
Well, I've said enough. I'll listen for a while.
That's okay. Yeah, we do have the scrapbooks that you brought to us. Must have been almost this time last year, right? The
Right.
teams. Yeah, they've been processed, so they're going into the archive soon. So anything that we can add to it would be wonderful.
Good.
Awesome. So did Louise and Susan, I know we have Hannah on the call too, did you play athletics at all with Marblehead?
Yes, I did. I graduated from Marblehead High School in 1970. So I was there when Mr. Tuvison was there, although I never had him as a teacher. I think you had my sister, one of my sisters, but I played field hockey mostly. But one of the reasons I was sort of intrigued by the whole topic of athletics is because graduating in 1970 meant I was pre-Title IX, before the rules were that girls' sports and boys' sports had to be sort of treated semi-equally. And it reminded me, in addition to playing field hockey, we had 3 cheerleading squads at that time. We had the football squad, girls cheerleading, we had basketball, and we had hockey, ice hockey. And at that time, the girls on the ice hockey cheerleading squad actually went out on the ice and did routines on the ice at breaks in the game. So it was pretty impressive. I wasn't up for that. I thought I'll stick with basketball and I'll be inside where it's warm. And I loved basketball anyway. At that time, Brad Sheridan was the coach of the boys basketball team. And I started, I think, when I was a junior. So I was a junior when I was a junior and a senior. And my senior year, I did become the captain of the cheerleading squad. One of my claims to fame, even now. But at that time, I think at the end of my junior year, we realized that the football cheerleaders and the football majorettes had both gotten new uniforms, and they were spectacular and they were quite expensive. And, you know, really the football, I think, had like a faux fur trim around the bottom. They were really impressive. And we had some really pitiful uniforms. So I went to the powers that be and said, the basketball cheerleaders need new uniforms, expecting that we would get something equivalent. But what I didn't realize was that the football cheerleaders and the majorettes came under the football budget. So they were able to pull from the football budget to outfit them. For the basketball cheerleaders, we ended up getting $50 total, and we're told to make our uniforms because we all took home ec at that time. So they knew we had very basic sewing skills. And we did. I remember we went out and we bought a red and white gingham check for blouses, to make blouses. And then we had black and red little A-line outfits that we made. And then we put little monograms on the front of them. But $50 for the entire team and our own labor to make these uniforms. And I think even at the time, I thought something's not right about this, that just because they have a big football budget, we got, that was like a stretch to, well, here's $50. And I was one of 3 girls. My parents had 3 daughters and who all went through Marblehead schools. And I think my dad even was a little bit annoyed that he felt like he wasn't getting his money's worth as a taxpayer because he had girls in school and we were all athletic. My younger sister ran track. My older sister also played field hockey. So I'm glad to see that in 1972, things started to change. And I think there's a little more equity between girls sports and boys sports now than there was back then. But that's my story. I have many, many very fond memories of playing sports in Marblehead and of being a cheerleader and traveling around to different towns, to different games. I remember one time we went to Revere, which was a tough town even then. And we all had, as I said, these red and white checked blouses and black uniforms, black jumpers over that. And we were the Marblehead Magicians, of course, but the Revere crowd started calling us the Marblehead Morticians because we were in black and harassing us when we were out on the court. I remember a friend of mine and I were just sort of laughing so hard we couldn't complete our cheers, but we were the Marblehead Morticians in Revere.
That's awesome. Did you notice the difference in between the boys and the girls sports in field hockey too, versus like the equipment you had, the uniforms you had versus the boys teams?
You know, there was such minimal requirements for field hockey. You needed a stick, which we had to buy ourselves. There was a place in, I mean, they had sticks you could use, but everybody went out and bought their own. There was a company called Cranberry in Marblehead that made sticks, and you'd go there and find your own. And then you just had pads on your shins. I think that was really about it. We didn't wear helmets at that time. I think they do now. I'm not sure about that. When you think of girls swinging wooden mallets around, there's a lot of possibility for injury. But I think there was just such minimal needs that, and we were bused to different places for games. So I didn't really notice then any real difference. It was just sort of the way things were too. The boys teams got much more attention. They got more money. They got more support from the public. We never had anyone come to watch our games. Very few people. But that's just the way things were. So I didn't question it too much until now.
Right.
Little late.
But you did. You stood up for yourself and your cheerleading teammates. That's
I tried, but then I ended up behind a sewing machine. You know.
Yeah, can you imagine that today? That would be in all the papers. That would.
Oh my gosh, yeah, that would be outrageous.
You don't still have it, do you?
No, I think it was left for the next season of, and I'm sure it ended up as a rag at some point, but I probably have pictures somewhere. I definitely have my yearbook pictures of us wearing these uniforms. Yeah.
So we're going to get a copy of the yearbook picture, I think, is what Lauren's trying to say.
What is she trying to say?
We need a copy of the yearbook
Oh,
picture.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well,
They're on public display at the library.
The story behind that is just, you flip through it without knowing the story you just told, and it would just be like, oh, interesting uniforms, but that story is amazing.
Right. Well, I remember we worked at it, you know, the rest of the squad and I worked at it, but I just, it sort of brings up all these thoughts about what Title IX did and how it changed everything for girls in sports and athletics. That was a real turning point at all levels, high school and beyond. Yeah. Oops.
Oh, Roger, sorry, you're muted again. Sorry.
With athletics, what was your involvement once you get out of high school in 1970?
I went to Springfield College. My very first, I college jumped quite a bit, but I went from Marblehead High School to Springfield College with the sort of maybe expectation that I would become a PE teacher. But once I got there, I realized that I loved sports and I loved playing sports, but I didn't want to be a gym teacher. Springfield was the kind of place at that time anyway, where you didn't ask people what their major was. You asked them, what's your sport? Everybody was very athletic there. They also said about Springfield at the time, Springfield College, where the men are men and so are the women. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Great.
But anyway, I lasted 2 years there as an English major. And I did a lot. I took gymnastics there. They had amazing staff. My gymnastics teacher was Mimi Murray, who ended up coaching US Olympic teams. But I only played for fun. I didn't join any any intercollegiate teams or anything like that, and continued to do that, when I moved on from Springfield.
Right. I could jump in and say something on Title IX, but I'd like to hear what Susan has to say, if she would.
Well, I'm afraid I'm going to disappoint you because I was so not athletic. But I was going to make a similar comment to what Louise, I think it is, said, that watching it from afar, it seemed like there was a real overlap between the cheerleaders and the girl jocks. And I don't know if you remember. I don't know if you remember, because I think it would have been the same era. Debbie Binder McNulty.
Yeah.
My cousin Janet Masterman, she was like captain of the basketball team and the cheerleader for the boys basketball team. So I remember that, but and I was in the marching band, and we also had these hideous black uniforms. We looked like, I don't know, they weren't all that flattering, but I do remember going to all the football games. You mentioned the traveling on the buses, and
Right.
of course the big Marblehead Swampscott games. And we had parades. I think I mentioned that in one of these previous Zooms. And then I was interested that you mentioned Title IX, because I was going to go back, what must be a decade before, because I remember in elementary school playing kickball and fun team sports like that. But then everything changed when President Kennedy decided that Americans weren't fit compared, I think, American children weren't fit, I think, compared to Russians. In 1957, the Russian Sputnik had gone up, and it seemed like the big competition started. And so we were given, I don't know if you remember, these fitness tests in junior high or freshman year in high school.
They were called like the presidential fitness, I don't know what it was, but you'd get a badge.
Right. Oh, did you get the badge?
I remember getting a badge.
I passed everything, but I couldn't throw the softball far enough. I remember that. I remember thinking my whole life, well, that's it marks you for life. That's a weakness. Women don't have the upper body strength that men have, although I did love gymnastics and stuff. But I always felt inferior because I couldn't throw the softball, whatever the limit was that you needed to throw it to pass the fitness test. So that marked me for life. No, I think when we were little, though, girls did more things like ballet, in my era anyway, dance, not so much team sports as little girls, when boys were playing baseball or whatever. Um, let's see, I mainly remember, what was it, Toot Cahoon and
Yeah,
I mean, Marblehead's claim to fame was hockey back in, I think, the 60s, early 70s.
yeah.
Remember, Roger? You must.
Certainly hockey and football,
Yeah.
I would say.
And then I remember there were school skiing trips.
Yes.
I remember going to Mount Snow is that in Vermont, I think. So we had ski teams, and then of course we must have had sailing teams. I'm sure. Did
Sailing,
Marblehead High School have a sailing team? No.
it might have been individuals. The sailing team has taken off, I would say 10 or 15 years ago. I'm not sure on that. But sailing was never a sport at Marblehead High, I don't think, until that point. Certainly the young people entered sailing competitions, and maybe individuals entered sailing competitions in the state, but they really, I guess, hopefully we can talk to some of the students who did compete with sailing against other schools, but I think you'll find it doesn't go back that far.
Because of course we had the Y camp.
Yes, that's what I was going to say that you were reminding me of with all of these things. For me, the big focus of my life pre-junior high, really, and high school was the YMCA. I learned to swim at the YMCA.
Yes.
I was on the very first gymnastics team at the YMCA. I worked at Children's Island for a few summers teaching swimming. It was really the focus, and the ski trips were huge to take. We would take 5-day excursions to Maine to ski with a group from the Y. It was really it's a great memory now.
Well, you're right. It must have been the Y, not the high school. And I do remember all the swimming at the Y. We had swimming competitions.
Yeah.
Was the Pleon, did that exist then to teach kids to sail? I don't remember.
Yes, that's the oldest
Very old, yeah.
youth sailing yacht club, if you will, in the country. And that dates back, I'm not sure exactly when, but it certainly was active, I think, during the 60s.
They had races and everything, yeah.
Right.
So was it the Y that was sort of in charge of, what is it called, intramural sports within the town for younger before you hit JV in high school? Or was that separate too?
I think of raising my own kids, mostly in Belmont before we moved back up to Marblehead, but there were a lot of second soccer and organizations for Little League. And I remember I played Lassie League a little bit, which was the girls' version of softball back in the day.
It wasn't called out when I played.
Lassie League and Little League. But the Y was just a huge social, athletic hangout spot. It was, it's one reason why it was so heartbreaking when they tore that building down, because I spent half my life there as a kid. And I think I've been inside the new one 3 or 4 times, but it's just not the same, where it isn't right downtown and it isn't sort of that small youth-oriented organization as much as it was strictly. I don't remember the old Y being, it must have had adult programs as well, but I thought of it as my second home.
Where was it located?
Where the National Grand parking lot is now.
It was a beautiful old building. I was devastated when they tore that down. It had become somewhat dank and dark and needed renovation, but it was a beautiful old brick Victorian building.
I think it lasted just about 100 years.
Ah,
Like it was.
it was very recent, Lauren, that it was torn down.
Yeah, fairly recently.
I would say in the last 10 years.
Mhm.
Oh, really? That recent?
Oh,
Wow.
yeah. It was a beautiful old building.
Mhm.
Roger, what were you going to say about Title IX and
Oh, that, you
sorry.
know, as a teacher, um, and starting at in Marblehead in 1964, and coming from Bowdoin College, which was all men, it was quite a transformation because when I started teaching in the 60s, I found that the young ladies in my class, and I was teaching 8th grade, uh, they were so quiet and shy and reserved, and they would let the boys answer the questions. And they weren't, to me anyway, they weren't enough involved. And at that particular time, and I have 2 children, both daughters, so I can really appreciate Title IX. One of my daughters played. In fact, she played field hockey, basketball, and softball in high school, and she was one of the captains in field hockey. And they were the first Marblehead team to win the Northeast Conference
Wow.
in field hockey in 1987. But anyway, getting back to Title IX, once the girls started playing sports, there was a tremendous carryover, and it was a tremendous difference. They gained the confidence, they participated in class, and I witnessed that. I witnessed that whole transformation as a teacher because I retired in '01. And by the time I get out of teaching, I really feel it was an equal playing field in the classroom and on the athletic field. So Title IX was just immense as far as I was concerned. Terrific. And Louise and Susan, you played sports, and I remember the Marblehead teams at that time, the girls' sports, and they were okay, but nothing like the competition now. To see these girls play softball and basketball, and it is just in soccer. They are just so athletic and so good, and go on and play in college, and it's just so exciting. And the thing I like being a teacher was the fact that this is all showing up in the classroom. One of the greatest things I think I've ever experienced in my lifetime. So that's my Title IX commentary.
That's awesome to hear. That's
Yeah.
really neat. And then tell us about your coaching experience too, in your baseball teams and such.
Well, I started coaching baseball in 1968, and Susan, you mentioned Toot Cahoon, who coached hockey at Princeton. He coached hockey at UMass. Absolutely played hockey at BU. But the other guy that was my first co-captain in baseball, and you remember this name, I think, Louise and Susan, is Bobby Blood, who is deceased now. And I was spoiled because Bobby Blood was one of my first captains. He and Peter Ormiston, and you probably remember that name too. And so I started Baptism Under Fire in 1968. We had a pretty good team. We made it to the state tournament. And then we never made it to the state tournament again until 1985, if you can believe that. I had good teams, but it was much more difficult to make the tournament during the 60s and 70s and even into the 80s because of the percentage rule. You had to win 75% of your games. In teams nowadays, all they have to do is win half the games to get into the tournament. So I had wonderful teams, but we just never reached that element. I had a team in 1978 that, and if you know anything about batting averages, this team batting average was 345. And we were playing against Lynn English and Salem at the time, and they were bigger schools. And we missed by one game making the tournament that year as a Division II team, I believe. All the rest of our league was Division I almost. And I'm sure they would have won a state title. That was probably the best team I ever coached. One of the fellows went on and played in the Red Sox organization. His name was Scott Paradise. They had another young man on that team, Brian Buckley, went on to be a quarterback at Harvard. I mean, the athletic trouble is they weren't baseball players. They just did that in the spring to, have fun, because they were either football players or hockey players for the most part. But I would get them in the spring and they were ready to, hang out, have a little fun. And we never really got to the point of that 1985 team. But I'll tell you, I've had some wonderful relations. Two of the guys that I still see, we have chowder at the Three Cod. I get together with one of them and play cribbage quite a bit. And the other guy is retired as a 30-year year in the Army as a colonel. And I know Louise and Susan, you're going to know these two names. I think you will, because they were class of '69. Cliff Bogus and Bill Goodwin. And Bill Goodwin went to West Point. He wanted to go to Brown, and he thought he wanted to be a teacher and coach, but he ended up going to West Point. Now what he's doing, he's a teacher and a coach after his 30-year stint in the Army. Cliff Bogus, who pitched for me, is a banker in Salem, at Salem 5. But those two guys I have known, and we've communicated, we've gone fishing, we have lunch or dinner once in a while. And so that has just been a phenomenal experience. So when you can mix the coaching with the relationship you have with some of the athletes, and, that has been a wonderful thing to do. But we've had our ups and downs. We had our ups and downs in baseball. And it was fun, though.
I don't remember the two people you just mentioned, but Bobby Blood and Pete Ormiston were in my class. And I remember, I talked about kickball in elementary school. I remember playing with Bobby Blood. I mean, he was the best at. He was the nicest guy, and just a natural athlete. He was great.
Susan, did you go to the Glover School?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember kickball on that back.
Yeah.
That back.
I loved it. It was the only team sport I think I ever.
No,
Kickball.
I'll tell you a memory I have of kickball. I don't know whether I was in 5th or 6th grade, but somebody rolled the ball and I kicked it over the house that was near the playground, and we played no more kickball after that. I must have really got into it. But, we used to play that all the time until that happened. I don't know if it ever got resumed or not.
You ruined it for everybody.
I think I remember it so well because they let girls play. There were a lot. I don't think the boys let us play baseball, but they let the girls play kickball, which is why I have such good memories of it.
Yeah,
in early years.
Yeah, now I grew up in Portsmouth, and when I was in junior high, which would have been in the mid-50s, we would come into school early. But keep in mind now, we didn't have a lot of outside coaching in club teams or anything like that. But we would come into school early and we'd have softball games from maybe 7 to 7:30, and it was guys and girls. We had the most fun time doing that. I don't know if you've ever experienced anything like that at that particular time, but I remember I had to get up early and go down and play softball with my female classmates. It was a lot of fun.
My memory of gym class in school was that they were pretty exclusively, the boys went off and did their thing and the girls went off and did their thing. But every once in a while, they'd let us mingle, and we'd do square dancing. Or, you know, something that that they could bring the two groups together to do. I remember square dancing was one. I also remember in class, gym class, which we had maybe twice a week in high school, girls basketball had these ridiculous rules where you could dribble twice, but then you had to pass and you had to stop. So you could dribble, stop, find somebody to pass to. I mean, it was not even, it was the.
Plus you had terrible uniforms. I remember the uniforms.
They were bloomers. They were these one piece, they were like romper suits or something. They were these one piece and they had elastic around the legs and they were sort of, they were like something that a 2-year-old would wear.
Are there photos of those? Because we'll need that as well.
They're in the our yearbooks, I think.
Yeah, I think they
Go
are.
back through all the yearbooks. There's a lot of sports photos in the yearbooks.
We better
Yeah.
start collecting those yearbooks. We don't have any.
Oh,
We have
you're
like one or two.
kidding. Oh,
We
they're
only
the
have one or
best.
two. I know that Louise, you said the library has them, I think, right?
Yeah, the
Oh,
library has copies of just about all the books going way back.
I would pick them up from various years when I would go to yard sales in Marblehead, because they're just so fun to flip through and see how the teachers changed and the principals changed and the clothes and the haircuts changed and the sports. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny when you look at the senior pictures, at least in my class, 1970, every girl has the exact same hairdo, you know,
Parted down the middle.
parted down the middle, perfectly straight, you know, that we worked at for, it was just the uniform that you wore back then. We reminisce now, I reminisce with friends of mine, like, it was also at that time, it sounds like I guess I am ancient at this point, but we couldn't wear pants. Girls
You are, I'm
pants
more.
at school. And so we were saying, what did you do when it was 20 degrees outside? Well, you wore knee socks and a little skirt. And it was
We're getting away from athletics here. We're getting into
It's good, though.
women's fashion.
It's all good. But wait a minute. So in your gym class, the boys and girls, men and women, they did separate,
Of
even separate
course.
sports, separate activities?
Of course.
And were they more suited to the gender? Is that it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's
They were
amazing.
wimpy.
Yeah.
And we didn't have gymnastics. Because
No.
I remember I went to a different school and I was thrilled by gymnastics. And I thought, why didn't Marblehead do this? I assume they have it now.
I think they do, although the Y again is still pretty much a leader in the gymnastics teams. And I don't know. I don't know how much of an athletic program, I mean, really just for the general population, there is in the public school at the high school level anymore.
There's a girls gymnastic. Some of the high schools have that still.
Yeah.
An occasional boy, I think, might be involved, but not as much as it was, I want to say, in the 70s or so. Maybe there were three gymnasts, boy gymnasts from Marblehead, who I think competed, and they may have been the only ones on the Marblehead team.
Yes.
And their names, I don't know if anybody knows their names. They're Wayne Chandler was one, and the twins, Noah and Seth Riskin, were two others. And all three of those guys went on and were very, very good collegiate gymnasts. And I believe we had a team at that point. And I would say it would have been around 1980. I'm not sure on that, but.
And now the high school, or I know the old high school has those fabulous tennis courts. Did we have tennis back then?
I don't think
Tennis team is, oh yeah.
Did
Tennis
we?
team, yeah. Yeah, tennis team has been going on for a long time. You know, getting back, Louise, to what you commented in gym, and also you, Susan, you know, the gym classes now, volleyball is a sport that both boys and girls can play. Badminton is another sport they set up and play. And obviously, the Gut and Feathers in town continues that. Another activity that, and you know doggone well that Title IX it was part of this on the grassroots, but another game I love to be, people play it. And right on my street, there are 6 wonderful courts that they made in the last year or two, and that's pickleball. Are you?
I've never played.
Yeah.
Have you?
No, I've never played. I'm intrigued.
Well, I'll tell you something. The school department will not let people use the pickleball courts. They're on Vine Street. There used to be tennis courts there. They're right down the hill from my house. And you go down there on a nice afternoon, and all 6 courts will be filled. And generally, there's 4 people on each court, and it's mixed. It's mixed, men and women, and they have the greatest time. And that, I'll tell you, where did that came about? Because of Title IX, I think. You know, the explosion of that sport.
Huh.
You mentioned volleyball, and I do remember playing that a lot in high school during gym class, but we were separate. I mean, girls didn't have boys on their team. You know, girls played girls.
Right.
You didn't have mixed volleyball.
No.
You grew up at the wrong time.
Yeah.
And that was true in our gym classes too in school. Same type of thing.
But are you saying now girls and boys play on the same play volleyball together?
Absolutely.
When I was a kid, in gym class, we always played together.
Yeah.
Oh, you did? Really?
Yeah, so that in the 80s. Yeah.
But girls are short. I mean, how?
Same in the 90s.
Wow. Yeah. Well, we paved the way for you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So-
Is Hannah
Like, this makes no sense whatsoever. You know, why are we doing this?
Is Hannah Kniff signed up? I see the name and I don't see her. Is she here? No?
Hi, yes, I am here.
What do you have to add to all this, Hannah?
Well, actually, and my boyfriend's here. So I'm only 22. I just moved to Marblehead.
Oh.
And in school, I'm studying programming and recreation and stuff like that, and theater, so like storytelling. And one of my assignments was to look for some online programs and something you're interested in and just like join. And so last night I ended up coming across this, and we just moved to Marblehead. So
Welcome.
thank you. I just felt like this was a great way to get a sense of the community, especially right now when you can't really go out and have these conversations with people. And I just thought it would be really interesting to learn the history of the place and the people. And I just really like stories, and yeah. So I don't really have much
Good to see you.
Oh, that's all right. You're always welcome to just listen or ask question if you have a question. That's what I'm doing too, because I didn't grow up here either. So
And usually these Zooms, Hannah, just to let you know, have a lot more people and younger people. It's not usually just older people.
Awesome. I do want to add that the presidential test, the fitness test, is still going on.
Yeah.
Really?
I'd like to hear from, as 22-year-olds, because I have a granddaughter who's 20 in college now, and I have another granddaughter who is 26. Both the girls, I have one at Bowdoin now. She's a swimmer, and the other young lady who's 26 graduated in 2017, and she was co-captain of field hockey and ice hockey at Bowdoin College. And we had a Zoom session last night with her and her brother, who was captain of crew at Dartmouth. And we had this Zoom session, and we were talking about golf. And my grandson said to us, yeah, all my sister has to do is just pick up the club and whack it. You know, she doesn't even take lessons, but she's such a superb athlete. And that's another thing that women can compete with men
Mhm.
so easily now athletically, and it's not just out running, it's playing
Absolutely.
golf, they had co-ed softball teams here for years going back, and it's great to see. And I don't know how old your boyfriend is, but I think you can add quite a bit about what your gym classes were like or what you do athletically now. You could bring a nice young version of what's going on here to help us out. So
Right.
I'm tossing that right at you.
Yeah, we were talking about how we did play volleyball together, and we actually went to the same middle school, and that was a thing that they would do, like 4-way volleyball, so that the nets cross over each other, and just like boys
Wow.
and girls everywhere along the whole entire court,
Yeah.
and like you would all just play.
Wow, that sounds fun.
That's cool. Well,
I have a
I
quick
have,
question.
oh,
Sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
Quick question about sports. So my mom went to high school in Maryland. I went to high school in Virginia, and we had Scholastic Bowl as a classified sport. Did you all ever have like a high school like academic team or like I guess Jeopardy team?
Mhm.
Oh, yeah. I don't think they were doing that back in my day, but I know they've had the College Bowl or the High School Bowl. I think GBH does something,
Yeah,
that
when I
kind of program.
I graduated in 2017, I went to high school down in Quincy, and our high school did have like a quiz bowl team, but they competed like regionally with different
Yeah.
schools. But it was a pretty small club. I don't know. It kind of gained some traction when I was there, but it was like on the newer side.
Interesting. I was just curious. My mom went to high school in the 70s, so I didn't know like if that was like a thing beyond like Maryland. So
Were you on one of those teams, Amy?
I made it to states, Louise. We came in third. We had it. It was a huge debate when I was in high school because they couldn't figure out why the Virginia high school athletic league classified Scholastic Bowl as a. I lettered in academic team.
Wow.
Like, what is that? Anyway, so I was just curious because like we had our own regional like TV show versions of it too. Like Mac McGarry out of Maryland, it was called It's Academic, and it was like the Saturday afternoon show. And so I was just curious, like if any other states like had this, and like I know Maryland did obviously, and now you're saying that down in Quincy, so I was just curious.
Yeah.
Marblehead has had a math team competition for other schools for quite a while. And I remember I got wind of it when I was teaching 8th grade, and this would have been probably in the 90s, early 90s maybe. I heard about this current events club, current events test, essentially what it was, but it was a group test. So we took students from Marblehead Middle School, and we formed 2 or 3 teams, and I provided them with as much current event material as I could, and they all took the test. And I think, in fact, I know a couple of them scored, if not in the top 5, in the top 10 nationally from that kind of competition. And it was a fun thing to do. They loved doing it, but and it was all the bright kids, Amy, like you like yourself.
I was going to say Marblehead definitely had in our era math team, debate club, and the mock UN competitions.
Yeah.
There was a lot of competition, but like Roger said, you were either a jock or you were a nerd, and they didn't mix.
Or you were a hippie. My day. There was sort of that middle ground.
Starting, yeah, hippies, yeah.
Yeah.
I have to ask before we hit 11 o'clock, and I'm sure you have other things you want to do. Tell me about the Swampscott Marblehead Thanksgiving Day game. What was that like? Did you guys go? What was that competition like?
That was I can comment because before we moved to Marblehead when I was 5 years old. My parents were both school teachers in Swampscott. So thank goodness they didn't settle in Swampscott where I would have had to go to school with my parents there. My father taught at the high school. My mother taught elementary school. But I remember the first year we moved, we were still loyal to Swampscott and stood on the Swampscott side of the field, but we quickly moved our allegiances over to Marblehead. It was a huge event, huge event. The whole Thanksgiving Day was organized around going to the game, and I remember one year my good friend, and I know Roger knows my friend Jeannie Cloutman, my good close friend Jeannie Cloutman and I made a great big sign that said, "Screw the blue." And nowadays, I guess you'd get away with that, but we unfurl it at the game, and there was an older man in the audience with us who was totally outraged and furious with us. And so we quickly rolled it back up and didn't display it again. But, you know, we would go out of our way to make signs and banners and dress in red and black and show up at the game every year. It was a huge social event as well as a athletic event, I think. Because that was also the era of Stan Bondalevich in Swampscott, which was a
Yes,
dynasty.
I remember a Swampscott Marblehead game, and in the field at the football field used to be behind the high school.
Right.
Susan and Louise. Well, then they were playing down at the middle school, and now the games are played up at the new high school. But I'll never forget the game, and it was against a good Swampscott team, and they were picked to win the game, and it started to snow heavily in the second half, and I mean heavily. And I think the score ended up 7-6, and a boy named Ray Forbes, who was playing end for Marblehead, and it was at the end of the game, Marblehead quarterback threw it up in the air, and he just happened to catch it in the end zone, and they got the extra point. And it was unbelievable. That game, you know, I can visualize that now. And another game I saw earlier than that was when Mike Lynch.
That was my 69.
Mike Lynch was the longtime sports broadcaster on Channel 5, and he went on to Harvard and played football at Harvard, and he kicked field goals and extra points. And he kicked a field goal to win the Swampscott Marblehead game, which he still talked about on TV because he was so involved with high school football players. And he would have, and not just Marblehead, Swampscott, Pete, he would challenge schools in Eastern Mass to come up with a reason why he should wear their sweatshirt on the air. I don't know if you remember that, but he would do that. Let's say Newburyport came in with the best reason for him to wear it. He'd be there reporting on the high school games. And it's not just Marblehead, Swampscott. It was tremendous competition, and what a tradition. But now it's all changed because of some of the new rules and new leagues and formations they have. So, I mean, I think we've been playing Swampscott twice. It's it waters down the whole Thanksgiving.
I think another thing that's changed it is how the way popularity of soccer has increased and has sort of maybe taken a little away. There's a picture again in my yearbook of the soccer team, and it's about 6 guys, you know, in their street clothes. And that was soccer in 1970. And now it's a huge, organized, much more structured program in town than it was back then. It was a new, weird kind of sport back in the 70s.
Yeah, sure was. Yeah. How are we doing for time, Lauren? Almost, huh?
Almost. Does anybody have any other comments they want to share?
I'd like to figure out a way to add to this memory bank.
Yeah, I think this is the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's so I don't know how you'd reach people to join in, but when you talk about, mentioned some athletes, Cahoon and Blood and Bill Goodwin, Cliff Boggess, people like that. There's so many great athletes during the 20th century from Marblehead, and it would be nice to be able to feature some of them somehow. Not just the athletes themselves, but some of the teams did so well.
That's a good
So
point. Yeah.
I don't know what we can do, Lauren. We gotta figure something out, maybe.
Figure it out. Yeah. Yeah. And maybe it's, I don't know if it's better on Zoom or better in person, you know, when we can get back all together. But I thought Zoom would be a good opportunity because it can be recorded, but also that anybody can join from wherever they are. So figure something out.
Well, just to put a call out of former athletes in the 20th century to write up their memories and send them to the museum or email them. And I wonder what you might get from that. I think you might be surprised.
I was going to say, if we can actually ask, all of you to reach out to your alumni networks to help spread the word that way. That's one thing that like Lauren and I don't really have access to because we're not from Marblehead. And I don't know how your alumni years or chapters are working. I know my alumni has this like online directory, but I access it because I have the password, obviously. So that was another thing we're gonna kind of talk about is like reach out to your alumni network and see, if you can just share and have them. I know, Roger, you're getting those PDFs together of the memories. So like, again, like they can fill out an online memory form. We have that available. They can send us an email. They can give us a phone call. So we are open to all types of communication to gather these memories.
Yeah,
I'll
that's
actually post something on we have a Facebook page for my class, and I can post something there and at least tell people, they can either participate or see, the recordings of these programs.
Yeah.
I just did a newsletter for my college class. I just finished it 2 days ago, and they provided a link, and in that link you simply put down your name or whatever. Then you could type up what you wanted in the newsletter, and then within that whole link you could add a photograph or two.
Yes.
And
So
submit it. And now what the college will do is they will take all our submissions, put it into a newsletter, add some of the college news, and email it out to the our classmates. And I would think if we advertised that on the Reporter and had some kind of a submission form on which you could download a photograph or two, I think you'd be overwhelmed.
the good news is we have a submission form. I put it in the chat, which you can do all those things, video, what do you call them? Images and text. And so, but I think still getting the word out is what we're fighting against. So
what about the sportscasters at the Marblehead Reporter? Couldn't they help us? Whoever does that, can't they help us do that?
Who does that?
We send out news. We send out press releases.
I know you do.
So yeah, no, I'm just saying, I think everybody gets so overwhelmed with everything. It's really hard to like get them to realize what we're doing. So everybody who attends, and we've got our regular crew here, we've got new friends, we've got, Roger, you're so well known. So it's like we also rely on all of you to like get the word out and say like, this is actually really fun to share, tune in and listen to. But I did write down your suggestions, and we obviously have them recorded here. So I really appreciate that. It's just, it's everybody's doing everything, and it's like how to get the right person, the right information, and the reporter's so overwhelmed, I think too. So
I think they're down to one person at this point. I don't even know what their sports is like now, but I can ask Chris. I mean, Chris Stevens and I, we talk all the time. So I'll ask her, who's there that's doing sports right now. And we can just try some new angles to push things. But yeah, anybody you can reach out to, appreciate that as well.
Well, one big one that I would reach out to is Alex Kulovich, who may need an activity or two. Alex was the football coach and then the athletic director for many, many years. And his connections far exceed what I have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. Okay, I wrote his name down. Thank you, everybody. It's good to see everybody, and welcome new faces. Welcome to Marblehead, Hannah, and boyfriend. I'm sorry, I don't remember your name. All right, guys. Well, this is every month, first Saturday of the month at 10 a.m. on Zoom. Hopefully we'll see you all again. And for other programming, we have a lot coming up, especially during this month for Black History Month, but even into March and April. You can see it all online on our website. So hopefully we'll see you again soon. Bye, everybody.
Bye,
Go on.
everybody.
Take care.